Veteran ABC reporter Sam Donaldson is no stranger to being in front of the lens. But on July 6, 2004, the newsman would become the news. On this hot afternoon, he arrives at his ranch in Hondo, New Mexico. He's been unable to reach the farmhand or the man's family, and with the feeling that something is terribly wrong there, he hopes to find them hard at work. But instead, he finds a ranch that's eerily quiet, silence broken only by lowing cattle. And what he discovers at the family's house will haunt him for the rest of his life. It's as though he's stepped onto the set of a gruesome horror movie. Broken glass, bloody chunks of hair on the porch. Inside, pools of blood, spattered walls, streaks of crimson where bodies have been dragged. Something horrific happened here. There's so much blood, but no bodies. All 4 members of the Posey family are gone. But when detectives follow the trail, they uncover the unthinkable. At just 14 years old, Cody Posey has killed 3 members of his own family. In trying to understand what could drive a child to do such a thing, detectives quickly discover the scene on that ranch is only the beginning, part of a story far darker than any of them could have imagined. Hello and welcome to the Little Shop of Crime. My name is Steve, and in store today is a case that takes us to the isolated deserts of New Mexico, and a controversial crime that still completely divides opinion. This is a story unlike anything I've ever shared before. By the end you might find yourself questioning what justice even means. It's the case of Cody Posey. Today's story begins in the dry heat of Hondo, New Mexico. Wide open ranch land stretching as far as the eye can see. And this is Chavez Canyon Ranch. More than 7,000 acres of dust, mesquite, and the thick smell of manure and hay that clings to everything. One of several sprawling ranches owned by veteran ABC correspondent Sam Donaldson. And living at the heart of it was the Posey family. By the summer of 2004, Delbert Paul Posey, who went by his middle name, had been managing Donaldson's ranches for nearly 3 years. Donaldson described the Poseys as a hard-working, all-American family. He said Paul was strict but fair. His wife Tryon was a delight to be around. Her 13-year-old daughter Marilia was a sparkler, and Paul's 14-year-old son Cody, he was quiet, always respectful, always helping in the yard. Chavez Canyon Ranch was working land, and even the kids mucked in. Mornings before sunrise, chores stretching into the heat of the afternoon, feeding the horses and cattle, cleaning corrals, hauling hay. It was a tough but honest life. To anybody looking in, it seemed like the kind of simple, quiet life a lot of people dream about. But as we'll find out, happy family snapshots don't always tell the whole story. Behind the fence lines of that ranch, tensions were quietly building. It was Tuesday, July 6th in 2004. Sam Donaldson and his wife Jan had enjoyed the long holiday weekend in Santa Fe. He'd spent the previous day trying to reach Paul Posey and his wife. There were no replies, and the house phone rang out. By Tuesday, there was still nothing, so he made the long drive out to Chavez Canyon, unable to shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. At the family's ranch house, the first thing he noticed was the eerie quiet, and strangely, Paul's truck wasn't there. He hoped the family had simply gone away. But the porch told a different story. There was a large red stain. He later said he'd seen a lot of blood in Vietnam and knew immediately what it was. There was broken glass and what were described as bloody chunks of hair, alongside a crumpled pair of eyeglasses and a cap. He peered through the glass door and saw what he said was heavy redness in there. The door was unlocked. Donaldson pushed it open and moved cautiously through the house. There was blood in the living room, spatters on the furniture and walls. In the kitchen, it got worse. A pool of congealed blood by the refrigerator, and what he described as massive swaths where people had been dragged across the floor, trails leading out back. There was so much blood, but no bodies. No sign of the Posey family at all. Sam Donaldson immediately called a friend and local law enforcement officer. The Lincoln County Sheriff and his deputies arrived at the ranch, confronted with a violent crime scene they would never forget. The smashed porch door glass immediately suggested a burglar, but they would soon discover it had been made to look that way. Inside, the deputies began searching room by room. The first clue appeared in Cody's bedroom closet, a conspicuous bundle of clothing, stiff with dirt and manure. It didn't mean an awful lot. Yet. The turning point came when one deputy spotted something outside, blood in the bucket of a backhoe parked nearby. They followed the fresh tracks, leading away from the house to a remote part of the ranch hidden behind some rocky outcrops. The tracks stopped at a huge manure pile. An unusually heavy swarm of flies hovered ominously over one particular patch. The sheriff and his men took a stick and began moving the top layers of manure aside. Within moments, fabric appeared. Denim, then the back of a belt, a shirt. By the next morning, in heat pushing past 100 degrees, deputies uncovered 3 partially decomposed bodies. Paul Posey, his wife Tryon, and 13-year-old Mary Leah, but still no sign of Cody. The only thing remotely resembling an explanation was a note discovered in the house. "Sorry coppers, I needed the kid to do the dirty work." The handwriting looked suspiciously like a child's. Whatever had happened here, it was becoming impossible to ignore one conclusion, that Cody was somehow involved. With the 14-year-old and the family truck missing, a search was launched. Later that same day, on the afternoon of July 7th, they found him, just 15 miles down the road, at the home of a couple of school friends, Leo and Gilbert. Cody Posey was arrested on 3 counts of murder and 4 counts of tampering with evidence. At the start of a 90-minute interview, Cody claimed to have no idea what had happened. He said he last saw his family on the morning of July 5th, when he ran away after an argument with his father over cleaning the corrals. But the facade didn't last long. He cracked fast. Cody admitted he killed them. He told police precisely how he'd shot each of them. He said he crept up behind his stepmother and assassinated her first, so she couldn't call for help on the house phone. He then lay in wait by the refrigerator and shot his dad as he came into the kitchen. And finally, he turned the gun on his 13-year-old stepsister, so she couldn't snitch. He said he didn't want to spend the rest of his life in prison. Afterward, he tried to stage a robbery, smashed the porch door window and wrote the cryptic note, a last-ditch attempt to mislead investigators. Cody had killed his whole family and buried them all inside a steaming pile of manure. He then cleaned himself up, changed his clothes, stole Paul's truck and drove to his friend's house. He told police that on the way he stopped to buy a cold, refreshing can of Sprite. It's thirsty work, triple homicide. He told his friends that his parents had been arguing and he needed some space. By all accounts, when Cody arrived, he was in unusually good spirits. At the same time the deputies were fishing his family's bodies out of the manure pile, Cody was having a blast, playing basketball, video games, watching cartoons, like nothing had happened. His friends later made a startling observation. "We were just having a blast all night. We just had fun non-stop. I've never seen that side of Cody really. I've never seen him so happy." And the friend's father, who accompanied the 14-year-old killer to the station, said, "He told me these were the happiest 2 days he'd had in his life. He thanked me for letting him stay." But Cody Posey's fun and games were cut short when police came knocking. Right now you're probably wondering what kind of monster this kid is. What could turn a quiet ranch boy into a cold-blooded killer? But what you know isn't the full story. For that, we need to go back to the beginning. Cody Posey was born in October 1989, and almost from the beginning, nothing in his world stayed still for long. He was just 2 when his parents, Paul and Carla, divorced. A bitter 8-year custody battle that bounced Cody between households, courtrooms and new relationships. It was an unsettled childhood, and things were about to get far worse. When he was 5, a horrifying headline appeared on the front page of the local paper. At a quiet ranch just outside Roswell, Cody's grandparents, Jay and Linda Posey, were found dead. His grandmother had shot his grandfather as he slept, then turned the gun on herself. No one ever fully understood why. As the custody fight dragged on, Paul remarried twice. By 1999, Cody was living with him and his new wife, Tryon, along with her daughter, Marilia. But Cody longed to be with his mother. She'd spent long stretches away, serving in the Navy. In 2000, she finally came home for good, and she wanted full custody of her son. This suited Paul. He didn't contest it. In fact, he surrendered all parental rights. No more child support, no more custody battles. Cody went to live with his mother. And for a moment he was happy. For the first time in years, life finally seemed to be settling into place. It lasted 3 months. The accident happened in July 2000. Carla, her new husband Russell, and Cody were driving north, heading to Washington to begin a new life together. They didn't make it. Russell fell asleep at the wheel, and the truck flipped and rolled. Carla was thrown from the vehicle and fatally injured. She died in Cody's arms. He was just 10 years old. Cody never recovered from the guilt. He blamed himself because he swapped seats with his mother. He wanted to sit up front with his new dad. He told his Aunt Corliss, "I killed my mum. It's my fault. That's why she's dead." On the day of Cody's mother's memorial, Paul turned up. He demanded custody of his son. Cody was desperate not to go. He pleaded with a police officer not to be returned to his father's care. One family member said he was devastated. He was crying like nothing you'd ever seen before. It was almost like a horror movie. It's important to remember that Paul hadn't fought for his son. He'd signed away all his parental rights, or so everyone thought. A technicality on the legal forms. He'd printed his name instead of signing it. The custody agreement was invalid, and Cody was forced back to live with Paul, Tryon, and Marilia. The following year, 2001, they moved out into the remote desert at Chavez Canyon Ranch, and Cody's turbulent childhood was far from over. Of course, a life punctuated with tragedy and trauma doesn't explain why Cody slaughtered his whole family. But the more Cody talked, the more twisted and disturbing the story became. You see, the reason he didn't want to go back to his father wasn't just because he and Tryon were strict, or because ranch life was tough. It was more than that. In his interview, Cody broke down and sobbed as he began to share the dark truth of a volatile relationship with his father Paul and with Tryon. Apparently, the moment Cody was back in their care, he was totally isolated from his mother's side of the family he adored. He was permanently grounded too. No after-school activities, no school dances or sports, no friends. He even recalled being cut off from his best friend since kindergarten. When the boy's mother called the house, Tryon told her that Cody had made new friends and hung up. Cody said he was alienated from everyone he cared about, but it didn't stop there. He was regularly denied food, water, or rest, forced to work long hours in the brutal New Mexico heat. The detectives leaned in and listened carefully. "I got tired of him hitting me, yelling and screaming at me all the time. He hit me all the time. I couldn't take it anymore." According to Cody, despite desperately trying to please his father, he was punished physically for every slip-up, every time he didn't fill the troughs fast enough, or clean the equipment to Paul's impossible standards. The physical abuse the 14-year-old recounted was horrific. Every single day he was kicked, punched, and smacked around. He was struck with rocks, shovels, coils of rope, pushed off horses, shoved into walls, crushed under hay bales. Instead of affection, he was given black eyes, bruises, and split lips. "That was a normal thing around my household," he said. "I can remember getting hit in practically every part of my body." He said these beatings happened up to 3 times a day. He told school friends his injuries were from accidents playing ball or ranch mishaps. He knew better than to tell the truth, in case Paul Posey found out. And by Cody's account, Tryon wasn't much better. She was more than happy to join in. And the abuse wasn't just physical. The emotional stuff left even deeper wounds. "You're stupid, useless. I should have tied you up in a sack of rocks and thrown you in a river." What Cody described was nothing short of psychological torture, an endless cycle of humiliation and shame. Dinner poured over his head for the crime of being unable to finish it, being made to fill the troughs with a tiny paper cup. He was belittled every day, always made to feel like he wasn't good enough, like he was disgusting or evil. Meanwhile, Marilia was the family's angel. Cody said he got along with her, but Paul and Tryon were bribing her to spy on him at school, and he would be punished for things they hadn't even seen. This led to a strange dynamic. Every time he made a mistake, Marilia was rewarded. I think it's important to remember that Marilia, she was a 13-year-old girl. She wasn't wicked, just a pawn in Paul and Tryon's twisted game. After Cody's mother died, he was given $600 per month in Social Security survivor payments, but this was paid straight into his father's savings. It was meant for her son, but Paul paid Cody just $10 per month for the back-breaking daily labour. He was even made to save this paltry sum to buy new work boots, when his old ones had holes that filled with muddy water every morning. It sounded as though Paul and Tryon resented having to take care of him. I mean, Paul didn't want Cody, we know that much. After all, he signed away his son once before, so understandably, there are those who believe he only demanded custody now for that sweet $600 a month. Oh, and the free slave labour. Police could scarcely believe what they'd heard. The way Cody described these things was as if they were normal, but none of this was normal. It was a relentless catalogue of sadistic abuse that continued until a couple of minutes before the shootings. What he claimed to have experienced was nothing short of a lifetime of torture. The abuse wasn't exactly a well-guarded secret either. It was pretty common knowledge around that part of Hondo, a tight community where people just didn't get involved in other people's business. But Paul Posey had been reported to Child Protective Services by Cody's biological mother, and again by his second wife Sandy, and a teacher filed a complaint after Tryon had told her she hated Cody for coming between her and her man. In desperation, Cody ran away from home twice before police returned him, and Child Services still didn't intervene. But now he'd told his story. No childhood, no relief, no escape. It was a lot for police to process. But for now, they only really had his word for it. News of the gruesome case spread fast, but before long, a ripple of voices began to emerge in support of Cody Posey. People who had seen the bruises, the fear, the humiliation. His beloved aunt, Corliss Cleese, had been one of the few constants in his life. When Paul cut off all contact, she took it badly. She said it was about control, and that he spoke about Cody as though he were property. I own him. He's mine. The two school friends whose house Cody had been found at, they described multiple incidents, like when Cody showed up at school with a huge black eye. He tried to cover for his dad, said it was a softball injury. A softball couldn't do that. He finally told us his dad had punched him. Even their father was familiar with the pattern of abuse. He said, there were a lot of people who wanted to whip his dad because of the way he treated Cody in public. Then there was Slim Britton, a gruff cowhand who'd worked under Paul for 8 months. He told Dateline that he saw trouble between father and son almost every day. One time, Paul rode up to Cody on a horse and whipped him hard across the back with a length of coiled rope. He said, I never saw a hand laid on him in love. Paul's second wife, Sandy, spoke to Dateline as well. She said Cody was sweet, kind and polite. She loved him like her own son. She described the constant effort it took to shield the boy from Paul's temper. She recalled Paul dragging Cody from a top bunk and slamming him onto the floor, and returning home one day to find Paul beating the 7-year-old with a piece of wood for bringing home bad grades. When Cody's mother came home on leave and saw the bruises, she reported it. Child Protective Services investigated, but instead of removing Cody, they ordered Paul to attend anger management classes and parenting workshops. The wife of another cowhand saw more than her fair share of disturbing incidents. She told NBC that she once saw Cody pull up his sleeves to reveal arms peppered with unmistakable cigarette burns. She told her husband, he is violent when he gets mad. I feel that something's gonna happen to that family. Either Cody's gonna kill Paul, or Paul's gonna kill Cody. Just 4 months later, her chilling prediction came true. But perhaps the most disturbing account came from Jim Forrester, an electrician who visited the Posey home when Cody was just 18 months old. The baby Cody crawled in Paul's way, and he snapped. Forrester said Paul ripped off his belt, grabbed Cody by the arm, and whipped him across the head, ears, face, neck, and back. A baby who couldn't possibly understand what was happening. That's not discipline, that's abuse, plain and simple. Cody's mother had to pull him away. It was the final straw, and soon after she took Cody and left the toxic relationship. The people speaking out about the abuse after the fact seemed endless, but by then it was far too late. Tom Sullivan, sheriff of Lincoln County, publicly stated that he believed the abuse. He just wished people had spoken up sooner. He said then maybe this could have been prevented. However you look at it, Cody was failed by so many people. Protective services, neighbours, teachers, and the tight-lipped Hondo community that just didn't involve themselves in other people's home life. As Slim Britton put it, the West is kind of tight-lipped about things like that. He wished he could turn back the clock and give Cody a voice. Cody's story moved into the final, dark chapter, the night that would change everything, when the relentless abuse, the humiliation, and the pain finally broke him. July 4th, Independence Day, a day meant to celebrate freedom, and a night that pushed Cody Posey to stand up for himself, with dire consequences. He said he was summoned into the master bedroom, and to his shock, Tryone was lying on the bed, nude. Paul demanded Cody perform inappropriate and disturbing acts on her. He threatened to burn him with a welding iron if he didn't. Cody said he refused to participate in the couple's sick fantasy. Tryone apparently encouraged him. Well, we're not related, we're not blood, come do it. According to Cody, she then grabbed him and tried to force him, so he bit her. In a rage, Paul pressed the hot welding iron into his son's shoulder. Cody ran away, hid in the corner of his bedroom, sobbing, curled up in the fetal position. He said, "At this moment, I more or less lost my mind." It was clear to him that this wasn't simply another episode of violence. This was a line his father and stepmother had crossed that they couldn't come back from. The detectives were stunned. Of course, they couldn't be certain he was telling the truth. The couple weren't there to defend themselves, and this was an explosive allegation. But when an officer photographed the 14-year-old's shoulder, there were fresh burns. Burns with a distinctive shape and size that investigators believed were consistent with the tip of a welding iron. 1 hour into his confession, Cody broke down and began to sob. "So what did you do, Cody?" "I tried getting rid of him." "How?" "Get him off this planet, because it would be better here without him." July 5th, 2004 was a hot summer day in Hondo. Minutes before the murders, Cody was cleaning the corrals, but he wasn't cleaning them as fast as Paul would like. As Cody put it, he got all mad and said if it wasn't illegal, he would knock my head off and roll it across the floor. His father slapped him, hard across the face, and this would be the very last time Paul Posey hurt his son. A lifetime of barbaric abuse culminating in a single slap that would have catastrophic consequences for the entire family. Fueled by years of compounded trauma, Cody went to the barn and picked up Mary Leah's .38 caliber revolver, which she used to shoot snakes. He emptied out the snake shot and reloaded the gun with standard ammunition, but one snake shot round accidentally remained. With the gun tucked behind his back, Cody crept into the house, where he found Tryone reading a book on the living room couch. He shot her in the head, but the first shot was the snake shot, so he fired again, just to make sure. He killed her first to keep her from calling 911. Cody waited for Paul to come inside, drawn by the gunfire. As Paul stepped into the kitchen, Cody fired once into his head, killing him instantly. Mary Leah ran in behind her father, and before she could react, Cody shot her in the head too, so she couldn't turn him in. The first bullet didn't end Mary Leah's life. She was still moving, so he aimed the weapon at his stepsister's head and pulled the trigger one last time. One by one, he dragged the bodies out through the back door and loaded them all into the bucket of this John Deere backhoe. Cody hauled them to a remote part of land where he tried to dig a grave, but was unable to break the hard earth, so he took them to a ravine where he dumped piles of manure on them instead. Cody then returned the backhoe to its original place and threw the gun into a stream. In a panic, he staged the clumsy robbery, changed clothes, and diligently turned off the water and electricity to avoid waste. He then took off in his dad's truck and drove to his friend's house, where he stayed until his arrest. There's something deeply upsetting about how happy he was for the days at his friend's house, now that we see it through a different lens. It wasn't the joy of cold-blooded murder at all. For Cody, this was a brief taste of normal life, all he'd ever wanted. At the end of his interview, Cody expressed regret. When asked why, he said, "It was the wrong thing to do. I miss them, even though they were mean." As news spread, the case dominated headlines across New Mexico. A triple homicide committed by a child was unheard of, and immediately more complex than the usual homicide case. It was a story that left people asking, how far can trauma twist a young mind before it snaps? Cody Posey was to be tried in a juvenile court, but New Mexico law meant that he could receive adult penalties if convicted. Facing a possible life sentence, the full weight of the legal system now rested on his young shoulders. Cody's aunt, Corliss Cleese, remained a strong voice in the boy's corner. She said, "This wasn't a cold-blooded act, and it wasn't out of malice. It was for survival. I don't condone it, but I don't condemn it." The trial couldn't even be held in Lincoln County. Too many locals knew the Posey family, and sympathy for Cody was so widespread it would have been impossible to seat an unbiased jury. And so it began in Otero County Children's Court instead, on January 16, 2006. Cody was still just 16. But despite his age at the time of the crimes, the prosecution was determined to put him behind bars for life. He pleaded not guilty. The trial became a moral battleground, and it ultimately came down to one question: calculated killer or broken child? Was this a cold-blooded act from a teen who knew right from wrong, or did the system fail a boy long before he failed his family? And what does justice even look like when the victim and the perpetrator are, in many ways, the same person? The prosecution claimed the stories of abuse were exaggerated. They said the family photos painted an entirely different picture, one of a happy family life, not a life of fear where Cody wasn't loved or included in family events. Prosecutor Janice Schreier insisted Paul and Tryone were loving parents, and that Cody simply hated doing chores on the ranch, so he took the opportunity to relieve himself of those expectations and that life. They even threw in the fact he'd once experimented with marijuana. The monster. The murders, they argued, were premeditated, calculated. He had plenty of time to contemplate his actions, the time it took to walk to the barn, to reload the revolver. He planned the order of the killings to minimize risk, even tried to stage a burglary. This all proved he was well aware of the extent of his actions. His 100-minute confession was played in full to the courtroom. The prosecution wanted Cody Posey convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder. Then came the prosecution's witnesses, cherry-picked testimony from those who'd never seen a bruise, black eye, or even a mark on Cody's body. Paul's brother, Verlin Posey, took the stand. He said he never once saw a shred of evidence of abuse. He said if Cody were to be believed, his face would have so many scars it would look like a road map. The prosecution's case was compelling, but it was time for the defense. Cody's attorney, Gary Mitchell, never denied what the 14-year-old had done. There was no argument over the facts of the killings, or even whether they were premeditated. Instead, the defense asked a different question. Why? Mitchell told the court that Cody was no calculated killer. He was a child who'd reached breaking point. He described the murders as a spasm of violence, the result of years and years of long accumulated abuse. 2 psychologists testified that Cody's ability to reason was severely impaired that day, overwhelmed by anger, fear, and a total emotional overload. It wasn't an act of evil, but the catastrophic collapse of a child who saw no way out. Cody took the stand and told the courtroom that despite the years of hurt, he desperately wanted his father to be proud of him. He said, "I wanted a family. I've seen families on TV. I wanted to be the kid that my dad said, 'You know what? Look, that's my son.'" Instead, he spent 2 days recounting the atrocities. The times he was dragged behind a horse, woken up with an electric cattle prod, or struck with the pointy end of a hay hook. This is what he said about his emotions during the crime.
I was overwhelmed. I lost control of emotion. I didn't know what I was feeling what I was thinking, I wasn't thinking.
But the defense didn't ask the jury to take Cody at his word alone. One by one, witnesses took the stand. Under oath, they described a home that looked very different from the smiling photographs shown by the prosecution. Slim Britton corroborated many of Cody's accounts of physical and verbal abuse, and described how the boy was treated like an outcast. Pilo, another ranch hand, told the courtroom that Paul had once threatened to cut off his son's balls if he popped the clutch of the ranch truck. Paul's second wife, Sandy, told the jurors, "I was the go-between. I would protect him. Paul really didn't like Cody, and I was afraid sometimes if I wasn't there, what he might do." And a Sunday school teacher testified that Paul and Tryon openly doted on Marilia, while Cody received no affection or praise at all. In the end, no fewer than 37 witnesses took the stand in support of Cody, and the defense also took the jury back to a moment that, in hindsight, was a warning everyone missed. Cody's cousin Sherry choked back tears as she recalled his mother's memorial, when he begged not to be sent back to his father. At the time it was dismissed as grief, but now we can see it was fear. And now it was time for the defense to focus on the tipping point of this case, the night before the murders, when Paul allegedly tried to force Cody to do unspeakable things with Tryon. The prosecution argued they only had Cody's word that this incident occurred at all, and the burns on his shoulder didn't tell the full story. But the defense introduced some damning evidence: Paul Posey's computer. Over 4,000 websites had been visited, nearly half were explicit in nature. Saved to the computer was a massive file of highly disturbing adult material, depicting parent-child scenarios. A computer expert also unearthed the remains of countless search terms related to this type of material. All of it had taken place in Paul's office, and all of it while the children were in school. This evidence was incredibly powerful, but there was still one unanswered question. Why did Cody shoot his stepsister? The defense offered a psychological explanation. As a child, Cody couldn't separate the three figures in his trauma. In his mind, even she was part of the abuse, though in reality, she was another child caught in the middle. In the state's closing argument, Janice Schreier labelled the abuse claims as an attempt to pile more and more manure on top of Paul, Tryon and Marilia. She said Cody wrongly acted as judge, jury and executioner that day. In his closing argument, Gary Mitchell urged the jury to see that Cody's actions amounted to self-defense. He asked them to place themselves in the 14-year-old's shoes, asked how much of the escalating abuse they would have tolerated before defending themselves. After 3 weeks, the trial came to a close. It took 12 hours of deliberation before the jury returned its verdicts. For the death of his father, Paul Posey, Cody was convicted of voluntary manslaughter. For the death of his stepmother, Tryon, second-degree murder. And for the death of his stepsister, Marilia, just 13 years old, first-degree murder. 3 different verdicts, one for each life lost. He was also found guilty of 4 counts of evidence tampering for his attempts to conceal the crimes. Cody had been dignified and poised throughout the trial, but he broke down sobbing upon hearing the verdicts. His Aunt Corliss wept loudly and collapsed onto the gallery floor, where she remained long after the trial had finished. She was later stretchered away by paramedics. Cody Posey was facing a life sentence for his crimes, even though at the time he was just 14. Under New Mexico law, being found guilty of first-degree murder meant that he could now be sentenced as an adult. This decision lay with the judge. The prosecution pushed for life. They said Cody Posey is a cold-hearted killer. I know that it's difficult, Your Honour, but I'm asking the court to protect society from him as long as you possibly can. Tryon's father gave this stark warning.
If the court turns this young man loose on society, he'll kill again if it suits his purpose.
The defense pushed for leniency. Cody's attorney argued he was still a child and could be rehabilitated in a juvenile program. Cody was the last to address the judge. He said, Your Honour, during the past 2 months you've heard accusations of me being a liar, a psychopath. You've heard that I'll kill again or end up back in the courtroom. I can tell you right now that I will never kill again. He expressed remorse throughout his trial.
I want to work on myself and my problems. I want to better myself. And I would like to show people who have no faith in me that I can and will do better.
They would have to wait 2 weeks for the judge to have the last word. In the meantime, something almost unprecedented happened. 7 of the jurors wrote to the judge urging he sentence Cody as a child. More than half of them. 3 of these joined a peaceful gathering of his supporters outside the court. These jurors had been deeply affected by the trial, bound by the law, but troubled by the outcome. But one of the most shocking twists in this case came from Marilea's biological father, Jake, defending his daughter's killer. He told Dateline, "Cody doesn't need to be punished for this. He didn't do it. Paul and Tyrone did this. I do not believe Marilea would have wanted Cody to be punished. He was already, and she knew that." Wow, that's one of the most magnanimous things I've ever heard. The judge considered the severity of the crimes, Cody's maturity, trauma, history, and prospects for rehabilitation. This is what he had to say.
Considering all of the factors together and weighing them against one another, I find that the state has failed to carry its burden of proof that the respondent is not amenable to treatment or rehabilitation as a child in available facilities. Since the court finds that there is a realistic possibility of rehabilitation through treatment, the court is restricted to the range of possible dispositions available within the juvenile system.
This ruling meant Cody would be sentenced as a juvenile, and on February 23rd, he received his sentence to remain at a juvenile treatment centre until he turned 21, with the possibility of parole after just 40 days. 3 months before his release, he was transferred to the Albuquerque Boys Reintegration Centre, where he learned how to adjust to life in society, this time as an adult. And on October 9th, 2010, his 21st birthday, he walked free, able to begin again. Opinions about his release varied, but most people said things like this.
I'm fine with that. He's going to be let out of his rehabilitation anyway, so if he's around somewhere here, I don't think he's likely to cause any trouble.
He doesn't seem like he'd be a real threat to the community. It seemed like he was in a stressful situation and responded.
In September 2006, surviving relatives filed a $600 million wrongful death lawsuit, not just against Cody, but against video game companies Rockstar, Take-Two and Sony. They claimed that Grand Theft Auto Vice City had somehow trained Cody to kill. As usual with these media influence cases, it was pretty quickly dismissed. And in 2010, Paul's brother and Tryone's father filed another wrongful death lawsuit that resulted in an $87 million judgment against Cody. Obviously, this is a sum he's not realistically expected to pay. It's largely symbolic, but it does ensure he can never profit from the case through books, interviews, or media deals. Since his release in 2010, Cody Posey has lived his life away from the public eye. Depending on who you ask, Cody Posey was either a deeply abused child who finally snapped, or a manipulative teen who used that story to justify an unthinkable act. What's clear is this case raises uncomfortable questions about how far trauma can truly push someone, and where accountability actually begins. For 14-year-old Cody, was it survival or revenge? Let me know what you think in the comments. I know there's going to be a ton of opinion on this one. But for now, thanks so much for stopping by. I really appreciate you. If you want more stories like this, you know what to do. And hopefully, I'll see you again next time. Goodbye.